So a couple of things before we go into specific destinations. There are a few key things to keep in mind when planning a trip to Brazil. First of them is that seasonality plays a crucial role in what we offer. So the best places in December are not necessarily the best places in June, July, and so on and so forth. So if you have clients looking to experience a beautiful beach, that will always be possible, but it'll just change which destination we recommend for them. There are other places that are more specific, and when they're off season, we always advise not going. And you can always count on us to let you know when those times of the year will be. To recap, there is a section of our website called Where to Go. If you have the chance to visit, maybe we can send you the link for it afterwards. But there is a pretty cool and interactive map of Brazil that comes up with small dots in three different colors and a monthly timeline at the bottom. So if you click on the month of the year that you have clients looking to travel, the dots on this map will turn either yellow, blue, or red for good time of the year to go, best time of the year, or no go. So that's a useful and user-friendly tool that you can keep in mind when planning a trip as well. The other thing is that the country is really vast, as I'm sure all of you know, and the air connections aren't always ideal. So allowing at least 3 nights per destination is what we think is the best fit, not to tire clients around and have them packing and unpacking over and over again. So 3 nights per destination. And last but not least, dividing the country in three main themes is a very easy reference to what destinations to propose. So we divide Brazil in three main categories, being nature, city, and beach. And we do think that depending on every client's interest, of course, but if we can have a mix of one of each of these destinations in a trip, we can say that the travelers have had a safe overview of the country. Um, if you think about Rio, for example, that's the place that caters for all three of these themes. So for people who have less time, we can try and make the destinations fit in all three categories. But um, if we can have three separate destinations, and being said that we'd like to allow 3 nights per destination, we're talking about a 10-day trip, which isn't that uncommon if we come to think about it. Sometimes travelers have a week, sometimes have 2 weeks, but 10 days is a safe time frame to plan a trip to Brazil without rushing around and being able to see the must attractions. So this presentation pretty much guides us through all these three themes and the main destinations, and that's what we're going to do today. So starting with nature, we have the four main places that we operate, being Iguaçu Falls, the one furthest down south, and then making our way up, we have the Pantanal, Lençóis Maranhenses, and then the Amazon. We'll start with the Amazon, which is a presentation in itself, and in future stages, we hope to invite you all to focused presentations and webinars on destinations that are a bit more complex or the ones that we sell most, like Rio. So the Amazon is pretty much two ways that you can explore it. One is being lodge based, which works very well, and that's usually out of Manaus, which is the main gateway and the main hub to explore the Amazon from. Keeping in mind, again, for US based clients, that there are daily direct flights between Miami and Manaus, which takes 5 hours. So it's easier to reach the Amazon from Miami than to reach the West Coast. Just keeping that in mind. So lodge based out of Manaus, the lodges that we prefer working with are a 3 hour drive or a 40-minute hydroplane from Manaus, Or the other way to do it is chartering a private yacht. There are, of course, regular departure boats, and we can operate those as well, but we prefer not to, for the main reason that we can never be sure of what kind of group clients will encounter in those regular departures. And if it's just a couple, for example, and then they end up being with a group of 10 bird watchers, they will have to follow the pace and interest of that main group. So all of our yachts are only done by chartering, so only exclusively. And as you all know, we have our own operation. We staff them. We do the purchase of food and beverage. We bring our own bed linen. We bring a Matuete host from either Rio or São Paulo, someone very knowledgeable in the region, but also to be the main point of contact between clients and the staff who doesn't always speak English. And that's all aside from the local guide, of course, who has the hands-on knowledge of such a complex destination. The best time to visit is between August and February, and we have this time frame specifically for the level of the rivers, which is at its lowest during this time. And so that's when the river beaches start showing. But it's truly a destination which is year-round. It's just our preferred time, so it becomes more of a beach holiday in the Amazon, which is that differential that we have, and we always mention to you. But during the high level of the rivers, during that season, it's also fun to explore the forest or the flooded forest at the time of the year in canoes and have different kinds of expeditions. And everything is a lot greener, let's say. Of course, it's pretty green already, but it's good to keep in mind that there's not a time of the year not to go. One of the things that we mentioned we would cover today is the difference between the Brazilian and the Peruvian Amazon. And the main difference is a geographic and kind of lengthy explanation to it, but trying to make it short. The Peruvian rivers of the Amazon are born in the Andes Mountains, which are pretty much a very young mountain range. So that means there's still a lot of sediment to them. And if you look on Google Earth, for example, or even for people who've sold or been there, the Peruvian Amazon is almost exclusively murky water rivers, the brown type of color, which means lots of sediments and also lots of life. That's why in the Peruvian Amazon you get to see a lot more animals than you do in the Brazilian Amazon, but it's not as pleasant to be outside because you have a lot of mosquitoes and you can't swim, which is the biggest difference. The Brazilian Amazon, our rivers are born in the Guianas, in an older mountain range. So we have black water rivers, which for the reason they're black is because of the tannin in the leaves that come out of the forest. And that tannin kind of produces a more acidic environment. So the pH of our waters are very acid. And that means that life can't reproduce in them. So that's the reason why you don't see that many animals, that much wildlife, but also means that you don't have mosquitoes and it's safe to swim at all times. The fun thing is that in the Brazilian Amazon, we still do have some rivers that are murky waters and the brownish color. And during the expeditions to the Brazilian Amazon, you get to visit those rivers as well in that ecosystem and go piranha fishing, for example. So it can be a bit more diverse than what you find in Peru. Just going to the next slide, just a picture of one of the yachts that we can charter in the Amazon. This is one of the mega yachts that we have, but we also have more regional looking, smaller boat options that we can send you afterwards in our portfolio. Also important to keep in mind when we speak of boats in the Amazon, there is another region besides Manaus, which is the Tapajós River. Some of you have heard us saying that it's one of our favorite destinations in the country. There we don't do lodge based. We only have one boat, so it's only available if you charter. But it's the only blue water river in the Amazon. When Jacques Cousteau, the French explorer, was in the Amazon back in the 60s, he called it the Caribbean of the Amazon. And it truly looks like that. It's crystal clear waters, and it's the only region of the Amazon where you can find all three ecosystems. You have that blue water rivers, which is only present there, the black water rivers, and the murky or brown water rivers. Going ahead to the Pantanal, this is the place to visit to see wildlife in Brazil. Best time to visit is from April to August, although it can be up to September, October. It depends on the rain. And same logic as the Amazon in terms of weather. We prefer visiting when the land is dry because that's when wildlife starts showing even more. But not only that, the months after October or even after September, it starts to get really hot, rainy, and there are lots of mosquitoes. So this is one of the places that we are very strict in selling when it's off season. I think the most important thing to understand about the Pantanal is, as you can see from this picture, there is a recent conservation project for jaguars. They actually started 5 years ago inside Cayman Lodge, but their results are really starting to show now. So as from 6 months ago, 100% of guests that go to Cayman Lodge now and do the Om Safari project that takes place there, they get to see a jaguar. So pretty much every guest that goes there gets to see one, which is quite impressive. The jaguars are still one of the most elusive cats in the world, and there wasn't still dedicated, a focused conservation project just for them, which means that for African safari enthusiasts who've seen the Big Five and then they go off to Asia to see tigers and such, there will always be one big cat missing from their list, or there used to be. And the place to see the jaguars in all of the Americas is definitely in the Pantanal. And now we have a very serious conservation project dedicated to them that has been proven to be very successful. Something good to mention is that one of the managing partners here at Matuete is a member of the board of this project. So we do get some special and very cool access to things that most people aren't aware that is even possible. To give it an example, a couple of times last year we got clients to donate the radio collars to the project, and in exchange they got to go with the scientist and actually collar the jaguar themselves, which is the closest you can get to such a creature, and something that we haven't heard of even in conservation projects in Africa who've been around for quite a while now. So quite impressive. Now Iguazu Falls, one of the seven wonders of the modern world, and it's in probably more than 90% of our itineraries, very conveniently combined with Argentina, so people doing a multi-destination South American trip. The thing we say about the falls is that it's really hard to reinvent the wheel. It's a mass tourism destination, and the way to do it properly or to kind of get around that is staying in the Brazilian side in the Belmont Hotel, which is the only hotel located inside the park, which means that guests of the Belmont have access to the park outside of regular hours. So that means the park opens at 9. Guests of the Belmont can wake up at 8 a.m. and go independently and do the walkway and so on. Different from the Meliá in Argentina, which is also inside the park, they close the pathways outside of regular hours, which doesn't happen in Brazil. Our side is also much smaller, but it's where you have the best views. So that picture that you see there is from the Brazilian side, for example. The way we try to do Iguazu a bit differently is that we're always scouting for new possibilities and what is there to be done that most people haven't done yet or seen. And last year I was there myself, and we found this chef, very renowned. He was the chef for the Belmont Hotel before. He was also the chef for Pousada Maravilha in Noronha. And he developed an experience which is not a cooking class, but rather a cooking demonstration in which he tells the story of Brazil through its food. So it's informative. It came to solve a problem that really bothered us for a lot of times, that we never recommended clients to go out for dinner anywhere, just staying at the hotel. Um, and now, because Iguazu is usually done in 2 to 3 nights, at least for one of those nights, there is a worthy dinner experience to attend, which we're very excited about and have received really good feedback on. This chef, he's a researcher, so he speaks Russian, Italian, French, English, of course, Spanish, and not only that, but he's also a musician. So while clients are enjoying their meals, he'll be playing the saxophone or something like that. It's quite entertaining. Oh, and it's important to say that he doesn't host more than one group per night, so be it a family of 15 people or just a couple, he only does private groups, which for us is also very important. Now, our last nature destination, Lençóis Maranhenses. Um, More and more, we hear people saying that they want to visit a place that no one else has visited yet. They want to show their friends very Instagrammable locations. I just got acquainted with that term, which I find hilarious. Um, but I think this is the unknown place in the world still that we have here in Brazil. And not only that, but it's quite striking, and it's not just picture perfect, it's actually perfect all around, if you ask me. So, Lençóis Maranhenses is a national park. It's basically a freshwater lagoon sand dune desert, which is a unique phenomenon in the world. What happens is that the water beds in this specific region are too high up. So it rains heavily in the first half of the year, from December more or less until now in April or May. And the soil can't absorb all the rainwater, so the lagoons flood. And that's how they fill up to become this giant uh, maze of lagoons with fresh water. That's basically rainwater. Um, so the season to visit is exactly after the rain stops, from June up until August, September, um, and what determines here up until when the season is going to be good to go is how much it rained in the first half of the year. So this year it rained a lot, which means that the lagoons will be filled up until September, even October. So this year the season for Lençóis is stretching a bit. Um, who is this for, right? It's not for everyone. It's not the easiest place to reach to logistically wise, which we like because it means preserving it more so if they were to build an airport right next to the park. But accommodation is still pretty rustic and a bit rough around the edges here. There is one hotel, as you can see in the presentation there, that we consider a level that our clients wouldn't really need a lot of expectation alignments, which is La Ferme de Jorge. It's a boutique hotel. They only have 8 rooms. They're building more, but it is the only property with the kind of quality that we aim to have. All other ones, they try and have the most attentive service and so on, but they are very rustic. So this is a destination for the traveler who is willing to forsake a little bit on the accommodation portion of the trip, because they know that what's outside is what matters, and that they will be visiting a unique ecosystem in the world. So this is definitely a place to keep on your radar for now, because we are pretty certain that in a few years it'll start hitting the radar for the international market for international travelers, and there's still a chance to visit, seeing the most authentic side of it. We have a couple of social projects that we do here, so not only you do visit the lagoons, but we like to include a certain human aspect and touch to it, which is so crucial in this type of location. So exploring here is quite an adventure, and it can be a very diverse holiday in terms of what you do. So you have the lagoons, you have horseback riding, you can do stand-up paddling, you can do some beach-related activities, and so on. Now going to our cities, we have São Paulo, Rio, the historic cities of Minas Gerais, which are composed for all those three in the middle, Belo Horizonte, Tiradentes, and Ouro Preto, and then Salvador, which, yes, if you're asking, it's located on the coast, but we don't sell Salvador as a beach destination, and I'll tell you why. Um, so Salvador was Brazil's first capital, and the way I like to put it is that if you want to understand the complexity of Brazil, you have to have at least 2 nights here. So Salvador was the place that received the most African slaves. It was the highest influx, and it was colonized not only by the Portuguese but by British, Dutch, German, and that mix of ethnicities and cultures kind of translate the melting pot that Brazil is in general. So this is where samba was born, for example. So it's the rhythm, soul and heart of the country. The city center is still very well preserved. It's a UNESCO heritage site. So there's lots of museums, churches, and you can see the preserved architecture from back in the day, and all of that mixed with the authenticity of the people who are still there. In Brazil, we call Salvador the capital, the black capital of the country, because it's the highest African descendant population in the country still nowadays. So that goes to say how well preserved the history and the culture of the place still is. We recently have had the Fasano open there, which is well, it has the Fasano trademark. It's a bit more modern looking, but it's in a historical building, so it kind of balances it out. But accommodation used to be a problem, or something not too obvious, something that we had to explain to clients, that they would stay in an old house with utmost service and comfort, but in smaller rooms and so on. So the Fasano came to correct that, in a sense that it's a more standard 5-star, what you can expect from a Fasano hotel. The historic cities of Minas Gerais definitely. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say Salvador is a year-round destination. Much like the historic cities of Minas Gerais, we like to avoid the rainy season here, because there's a lot of walking and it's a hilly region. So to do all of this when it rains and when it's too hot out, when it's our summer pretty much, we prefer to avoid doing it, but it's not that it can't be seen. So after the Portuguese and the Spanish, even still at this time, had found gold in Mexico, Peru, and all throughout Central and South America, they were still to find gold in Brazil, and that's where they did it. They finally found gold here, and they used to send it out to Paraty, from where they sent it back to Europe then. So this is a place for those very interested in history, more so than anything, also architecture, and there's still some deactivated mines that can be visited, and but definitely has a specific crowd which is interested in the history of the country. When we take Belo Horizonte alone, it can be visited without doing the historical sites, for the single reason of Inhotim, which is a contemporary art center. It's the biggest open air museum in the world, and through a beautiful garden, which was privately owned. So this guy had a very deep interest in botanics, and he got all sorts of different species that weren't native to Brazil, and imported them into his farm, into his property, and pretty much started building galleries all throughout to house different art installations. So it can be from photography to paintings to more interactive pieces. Uh, so it's a sort of museum that doesn't feel like a museum and caters for all ages. It's one of our favorite destinations in the country. And now there's also a Fazano hotel that just opened up there, and accommodation there was an actual issue. There wasn't enough expectation management that was enough to describe how poorly accommodated clients would be. So, although Belo Horizonte is an hour and 20-minute drive from the art center, it's still worth staying at the Fazano to visit the museum. São Paulo is, the largest capital in Latin America, a place for more cosmopolitan travelers, but also the place for art enthusiasts. Some of the best galleries in the country are here, some quality museums, and definitely the place to eat very well in Brazil. Well, you can do that all over Brazil, but this is where most of the Michelin-starred restaurants are at. Um, it's a convenient stop either on arrival or departure from Brazil, um, because it's the most important hub. It's where we have the most international flights in and out of. Some very active street art scene, which we've seen for the past 5 years or so. It has become a lot less gray than most people who've been here before that remember, and a lot more fun and can cater to all different kinds of interests. It doesn't have to be that uh, inconvenient logistic overnight. We can actually make something out of the visit to São Paulo. It's actually the one place in the country now where we're doing a favela related experience. After the ever since the Olympics, we have stopped doing favela related experiences in Rio for security reasons. And there are two very interesting art projects that happen inside of favela here in São Paulo, um, which we take clients to visit. And for those curious to see those type of neighborhoods, it's the place to do it in. Finally, Rio, in our city's destination. I think Rio needs no further introduction, although it does require a training in itself. Um, we can pretty much do anything. I like to say that, well, one of the Matueta's trademark, one of the things that we do exclusively is privatizing that attraction that you see right there in this picture, the Corcovado Mountain and the Christ the Redeemer statue. And the way I like to put it in Rio is that, if you have the right budget, we can make the Christ clap for you. There's nothing we can't really do there. It caters for all ages, from small children to an elderly traveler to someone traveling solo, people in larger groups. Um, Anything can be done. We are often asked about the security issues in Rio, which we are very frank and open about. They are real, they exist, but they are focused in non-touristic parts of the city. What you have in the places where our clients are taking is the petty pickpocketing. So we advise, of course, travelers to be smart, not wear all of your fanciest jewelry out in the streets, and be aware of your surroundings. But that's not all that different from any other big city in the world. Um, it's of course an year-round destination, but like we say, Carnival and New Year's are a must. If you're looking to do some quality partying, there is nothing like Carnaval. This year it was in March, but next year it'll be in late February. A lot of people don't know, but Carnival is actually quite a fierce competition between the so-called samba schools. So they each have a theme every year, and they have to portray that theme on the samba drum during their parade. The fun thing to do here, not only to watch, which we have different ways to doing so, but for the right type of client, we can even get them into costumes and join the parade themselves. Um, it's important that people who are visiting Rio during Carnival need to understand that they are not seeing uh, Rio as it is in any other time of the year. The streets get packed, all the sightseeing, we have to plan around the street parties because they take over the entire streets, and the schedules have to pretty much go around Carnival. So if you think you have the right client for it, that's perfect, and it can be a lifetime experience. But they just need to understand that when you're in Rio for Carnival, you're in Rio for Carnival, and not much more than that. Um, what happens is for clients can get here a few days earlier or leave a few days later, so they can experience some of the city in a more normal pace. New Year's is another event that is a lifetime experience. It has to be seen at least once. I think everyone here agrees that I don't know many other nationalities that can party like a Brazilian, and during the New Year we just take that to the next level. So it's millions of people out on the streets in Copacabana Beach where the fireworks show happens. There's no Photoshop in this picture. That's really what it looks like. And the energy that comes from that and greeting a new year, starting a new year off in that energy is something undescribable. So there are two hotels that offer really good parties and views to this event. One, of course, is the Copacabana Palace. They have one of the most traditional and well-known parties for New Year's in the country. And the other one is the Emiliano. They also have a party, but it's just for guests, whereas the Copa takes non-guests as well. Of course, the Emiliano has less than 90 rooms, whereas the Copa has over 200. So the sizes of the parties are proportional, so is the cost. But staying there, even if you want to stay in either hotel and just have you and your significant other in an ocean view room and have that view from the balcony is already quite an event, quite an experience. Good news is there's still good availability for New Year's in Rio or in Brazil in general for this upcoming New Year. It's actually something useful to know. Brazil tends to be a last minute destination for New Year's. So up until October, we can still find very good availability. It doesn't have to be something you got stuck with, but rather the holiday that clients planned for that they wanted, you can still find it in Brazil. Now, finally, going to our beach destinations. Um, it's something that we always like to start saying that there's an expression that says my cup of tea, right? Or right down my alley. So in Portuguese, we also have that expression, but it's minha praia, which means my beach. So that goes into saying that we take our beach stays very seriously. And it's a very democratic offers of beaches around the country. So if you have the traveler that is looking for a lively village and still want to have that amazing beach, or clients who just want to pretend like they left the world behind, and if they like kite surfing, if they like boats, if they want resort style of hotels, or if they want boutique properties, we can cater to all of that. All you need to do is let us know what kind of traveler they are, and we'll make the right suggestions. So, starting with Paraty, the colonial village right between Rio and São Paulo. It's a 4-hour drive each way or a 40-minute charter flight either by heli or a small plane. I think the most important thing to understand about Paraty is that it doesn't have a proper beach. It's not a place that you walk out of your hotel and have a beach right there for you. But the bay where it's set by, it's one of the most amazing sceneries in the country. It's called the Green Coast between São Paulo and Rio. So that takes up Paraty and Angra. And there's a myth that says that this bay that Paraty and Angra share has 365 islands, so one for each day of the year. I've tried counting them, but I was very unsuccessful in that task. But I'm pretty sure there are not that many, but still, it is the place to get on a regional looking boat or even on a speedboat, a yacht, and explore these hundreds of islands around the bay, which have that the backdrop of the entire trip is green covered mountains like you see in this picture and the green waters of the ocean, sometimes blue but mostly green, which is why it's called the Green Coast. Not only that, but Paraty has the advantage of having a very charming village, very picturesque, with very good accommodation as well. So you can also bring some of the cultural and historical elements into the trip. Like I mentioned, this is the village where they used to send the gold out from to Europe. So it wasn't built there by mistake. It's one of the very few places, few spots in all of our coast where the wind only blows from the ocean into the city during the day, and it only blows the other way during the evenings, which meant that you could never be invaded in the nighttime. So it was a strategic location for them to build the city, the fort, everything right by that bay. So it's fun facts like this that clients will have when they visit Paraty, and it's especially a good destination logistically speaking, exactly because it's right between São Paulo and Rio. So even in a road trip, clients could do starting in São Paulo to Paraty and then finally off to Rio without having to take a plane, for example. Búzios is also in the state of Rio. It got really popular in the 60s after Brigitte Bardot visited and kind of made it her beach town. It's also convenient located, 2.5 hour drive from Rio, and beach hopping would be the thing to do there, explore different beach locations inside one, but we are also very frank and open about the fact that accommodation in Búzios can still be a bit of a challenge. We have not that constant of good feedbacks like we have in other locations, but we do have some of our most beautiful private villas are in Búzios and also some of the biggest. So for larger groups wanting to do a relaxed beach stay, very easily reachable from Rio, this is definitely the place to consider. Moving further up north in the country, in the northeast, also in Bahia, we have Trancoso. This is where the accommodation tends to be a bit more unanimous as far as feedback goes. So just to give a little bit of feedback, Trancoso was a fisherman village some 20 years ago, and at first the hippies found out about it, and it wasn't long after that that the jet setters of Rio and São Paulo, the very wealthy Brazilians, also came to discover this place and build their mansions around it. So the way I like to explain Trancoso is that it's where very rich people go to pretend that they're fishermen. So you have that really laid back, bobo chic type of vibe. At the same time, you're in a place with world-class restaurant and hotels in a beautiful beach setting. From this picture here, you can kind of have an idea of what the destination looks like. So this is a picture of the main square called the Quadrado, which means square, literally. We're not very creative, I'm sorry. So you have the church right there at the end, and then on the back there you can see a blue line, which is the ocean. So Trancoso, in that main area of it, is pretty much built on top of a hill, on top of a cliff. One of our favorite hotels is called Ushuaia, is located exactly on this main square. So if you were facing back from this picture, you would see a lot of colorful houses lined up until the end of it. Not too many because it's not too big, of course, but Ushuaia is exactly one of these colorful houses. So it's fun because it doesn't look like a hotel, but from this picture you kind of have the perspective that you need to do some walking to get to the beach. Of course, there are also hotels right on the beach, like Tutabel. And in Trancoso is where, because of the nature of the place, that it's where the wealthy Brazilians built their summer houses. This is the place, the destination that we have the highest number of houses in our portfolio of private villas. So it's a good and easy solution to larger groups, for example, or even just for couples. We also have villas, which are one of these houses in the Quadrado, so we can pretty much cater to every wish and desire. It's important to know that during the New Year's period, during the festive, Trancoso just changes completely. It stops being the laid back kind of place that it is and becomes the place to see and be seen, and for the best parties in the country, the most sought after parties in the country, where most of our celebrities go to. Um, so it does have a crowd for it, but it's important to understand that it's a completely different place altogether. Fernando de Noronha, also still not much on the radar for international travelers. It's a very remote island off the coast of Brazil, as you can see in the little map there. So for you to reach Noronha, you mandatorily have to fly into Recife because that's the only airport that connects with the island. The entire place is a protected reserve. It's very, very small, so in a 15-minute drive, you can go across the island completely. And because the island is a protected reserve, this means that there are no hotels on the beach and not much structure on any of the beaches that you find around, which we think is quite good. It's something that you can't find easily around the world nowadays, but it also means that it's not for every type of traveler. So it's more for the hands-on type of traveler who doesn't mind bringing their own coolers to the beach, but knowing that because of that they will have a very rough and wild looking environment, which is harder and harder to find as tourism spreads to locations like this. It's the place in Brazil to do scuba diving. There are several different points in Brazil, in Noronha, for you to scuba dive, and there is one specific beach in Noronha called Baía do Sancho that for almost 7 years now, if I'm not mistaken, has been elected the most beautiful beach in the world by TripAdvisor. I know TripAdvisor may give us goosebumps in terms of what they recommend and what they think is good, but it is also a community-driven platform. So quite a lot of people out there thinking that the most beautiful beach in the world is in Brazil, and I definitely think it's worth checking out. Finally, Jericoacoara. It has a similar story to Trancoso, being that it was also a picturesque and remote village that was found out by the hippies. The only difference is that it stayed that way pretty much. So still very relaxed and laid back place, but one that got accessed by mass tourism very quickly and very abruptly. So it did spread out quite a bit. There are still a few accommodations that are really worth visiting and going to, but it will be a bit more crowded than what Trancoso is. The reason to go here is basically kite surfing. It is the place to kite surf in the country, and not only that, but it combines well with Lençóis Maranhenses, with that national park that we saw earlier. There is a 10-day trip that you can cross by land in a mix of boats, canoes, 4x4. You can cross from Lençóis Maranhenses until Jericoacoara and have this be the last beach destination in the itinerary. Um, it's close to Fortaleza, which for the French market, for example, has represented a good hub. There are direct flights daily now with Air France, and from there it's a 4 hour drive, 4 to 5 hour drive to Jericoacoara, which off season still resembles a quiet village with very beautiful beaches all around. And last but not least, I do like to remind you that we have our private villa portfolio. You can find all of our villas in matuetavillas.com, or we have a white branded website called brazilvillacollection.com, which is a mirror of our main website but without any mention to Matueta, so you can forward that directly to your clients. And it's a smart and worthy solution for larger groups. We have villas in almost all destinations that we operate, especially beach destinations, but also some in the countryside. And we have a team exclusively dedicated to that, to producing the menus, to staffing the houses. We don't outsource this operation, which is quite a differential when you think about this type of concierge service that is provided in other places, where after the rental they outsource this to a third party company, whereas here we have a team just dedicated just for that, and we never lose control of the trip and of the quality that is being delivered on the field. So that's our presentation, our Brazil 101. I surely hope that you learned a lot and had a good time. Um,